guys? Caleb here with an all-new episode of the Show Me NASCAR podcast. As you can see, our usual host, Harry, isn't able to join us today, but I think you can agree we got a pretty good substitute to fill his place. Today we got the one and only Mr. Bob Pockrass of Fox Sports. Bob, it's truly an honor to have you on here, man. How's everything in New Hampshire? How you been doing? And tell us all about it.
Well, we're in New Hampshire. See what the weather brings. No traction compound on the track this weekend because they have this wet weather package. So I think they didn't want to mess with that potentially getting really slick in those areas if they put down some of the resin. So a little bit different New Hampshire surface maybe for people this weekend, and we'll see what it brings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Weather's definitely been in the question there. But yeah, no traction compound for this weekend at New Hampshire. Weather's certainly going to play an issue. Do you see it more likely that drivers and teams are going to have to strap on their wet weather tires for Sunday?
I think it's a possibility. Again, NASCAR is going to put them out there if it's storming, and I think the question is I think the forecast is that it likely will be some rain. The question is when, how much, and for how long. So certainly think with no lights here, sundown around 8:25, that they potentially could certainly. I mean, the short track wet weather package is made for a place like New Hampshire, where the flat track, no lights. This is a place where I think they feel like they could run it and have a race that you could feel like it's an actual competitive event.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Tell me, I just want your honest opinion. 2023 has definitely brought a bunch of different storylines. Some good, some bad. How, with your experience with racing and been in the media, in the NASCAR media for so long, how does 2023 stand out? Does it stand out in any particular way?
Oh, that's a good question. I think certainly just the whole dynamic has changed a little bit with Atlanta being added as kind of a super speedway race, and now drivers kind of feeling a little bit more comfortable there. You had the Chicago Street Course, so you've added, it was necessarily an added road course race, but something totally new. So I think it's, just like any season, you have the unexpected storylines. I think the unexpected storylines this year were the Chicago Street Race, and then if you go back to the start of the year, Chase Elliott getting hurt for being out for 6 weeks, Alex Bowman being out for a few weeks, and then the Chase Elliott suspension for a week. I think those storylines, things that maybe you probably wouldn't have predicted any of those at the start of the year, except for the Chicago Street Course, and you probably wouldn't have predicted that once they got the race off in the wet that it would be as good as it was.
Yeah, and you mentioned Chicago because coming into the season, people were kind of questionable about Chicago. Even me myself. So you were there in person. You got to experience all that. Tell me, what was Chicago like in your eyes? What did you think went well, and what are some things you think NASCAR could improve on?
Well, I mean, they got the race in after a huge storm, so the fact that they were able to race in the wet and kind of conduct a good race in the wet to the dry, I thought went well. I thought for the most part, the course seemed good. The drivers had areas that they were concerned about, but nothing that would totally surprise them. So, I think there's certainly maybe areas, especially like with tire packs and maybe some of the turns, could they improve those possibly? But, I think that, all in all, for what, for never having done a street course before, I think that people felt pretty good about the course itself and everything. I think the big issue has to be is that it was billed as a festival, and, two of the main concerts were not done, right?
Right.
And so the question is are they going to do anything for fans? The hard part is NASCAR's has that wet weather guarantee, but that's for the races, not for the festival. So I still think NASCAR is going to have to. Well, I don't have to, but if NASCAR wants to be good as far as on a PR move, they definitely would need to do something for fans who we're expecting to see the Chainsmokers and expecting to see Miranda Lambert. I mean, those are two big. And this event was billed as a, music concerts and race, and
Right.
they barely got a third of the concert, and then they got, about half a race. When you combine the Cup and the Xfinity events. So, so I think that overall it was good. I do think obviously there's some work to be done for year two, but you would expect that anytime you have an inaugural event.
Yeah, and I think this just proves, because like I said, coming in here, a lot of skepticism about doing a street course, but now it's obvious that NASCAR can do a street course. Do you see in the future? I mean, obviously Chicago's under a 3-year contract, just depending on what the government does about that. The Chicago government, I should say. Do you see this being a trend of the future of NASCAR at least having at least one street race on the calendar?
Yeah, I would think for sure they'll have one. Potentially could do two, depending on who funds it. I don't. NASCAR says they spent over $50 million on this project. A lot of that, or at least some of that, is concrete because you can't really move those concrete barriers all that far. My guess is they're probably being stored at Chicagoland Speedway or somewhere like that. But if there's a city that wants to have them, and there's a and they're willing to foot some of the bill, I wouldn't be surprised if NASCAR added a second one. Not saying that would happen in 2024, but looking a little bit further down the road.
Yeah. All right. Now this is glad we're on here. You're on here today. Just wanted to really talk about. You've been a big part of NASCAR media. I just have to ask. Just some of your history. How did you get into sports journalism just itself? Was this something that you've always wanted to do?
Well, I was a student at Indiana University and worked for the school paper and did a semester in news, and then moved over to sports and kind of been involved in sports ever since. I went from Indiana University at my first job out of college. I spent 12 years at the Daytona Beach newspaper covering high schools and colleges. And if you're in Daytona Beach, you're going to do some racing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where. I mean, I was from Indianapolis, so I was familiar and had covered the Indianapolis 500, but I wasn't too familiar with stock cars when I went to Daytona in 1991. But obviously, there you get a quick education on stock cars, and that's kind of really where my NASCAR coverage would start. 92 was my first Daytona 500, and then let's see, in 2003 I went to NASCAR Scene magazine, which kind of evolved to SceneDaily.com.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually went over to the Sporting News, and then ESPN, and then Fox.
Nice. Tell me, from 1992 at Daytona to 2023 here at New Hampshire, how much has NASCAR journalism changed? How much has it evolved? What's evolved? What it used to be like back in the day? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are just interested in doing that or learning about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, journalism has changed so much, right? Before, now with social media. I mean, 92, you barely had internet, right? Yeah, like there weren't websites,
Right.
or they were just coming on. So that, so I mean, you're just talking about a whole different, just totally different because, you could. I mean, you're going to press at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. You can give people time to give you information or wait on a story to develop. But now, obviously with social media and the internet, there's everything is very immediate, and you're not necessarily say, well, yeah, you can. I'll give you 6 hours to get back to me on that. That doesn't necessarily. I mean, that happens now, but you're obviously going to write and then update. So I think that it was just the whole way people consume information has changed than what it was in 1992. So and look, the other thing that's changed is that if drivers or teams wanted to get their message out, they pretty much had to do it through the media. And now they can control their message much more. They can put out their message through their websites, through their social media. Before they didn't really have they didn't have the ability to do that. They weren't printing newspapers.
Right.
So that was really the only way, in the early 90s especially, that they could get their information across, was to use the media.
Nice. And you mentioned social media there. One of the biggest platforms you're popular on is Twitter. I mean, I don't even know how many followers you have, but I know it's a big number, probably bigger than I'll ever get. But just tell me, what is it about Twitter that you, Bob Pockrass, love, and how do you feel like that's helped the NASCAR journalism out for sure?
Well, I mean, look, whether you love it or not, I mean, that's the way people consume information. So you might as well embrace it. And I love Twitter in the sense that that allows us to communicate information to fans and deliver information quickly. And look, this is NASCAR, and auto racing is not an easy sport to understand. There's a lot of things going on, and so for the ability for journalists like myself to connect with fans, to give them information to help them understand, is a great thing. And then plus, obviously, it's a way for us to promote our content, whether it's video content or written content or content specifically designed for Twitter.
Yeah, and just with social media nowadays, you're one of the most popular faces in the garage. I swear, you're probably more popular than some of the drivers in the garage. What has the fans coming up to you saying, "Hey, Bob, love reading your articles." Did you ever imagine that you would be as popular with the fans as you are? Because I mean, really, you are.
No, I don't know that you ever imagined it. I do think that, look, when I worked at Daytona for the Daytona newspaper, I worked in DeLand, out of the DeLand office, and DeLand's a pretty small town, small city. About 20 miles west of Daytona. And I wrote about the local high schools and Stetson University and Volusia County Speedway. And there were times where I would go to lunch, and you could hear the people in the booth next to you talking about local sports, and you kind of thought to yourself, wow, that guy or that woman or person read my story, right? Because you could tell by what they were talking about that they had probably read my article in the newspaper, and that is always a great thing to hear. And so when you can have that kind of impact, it's great. If you can impact somebody's conversation, if you can impact whether somebody decides to go to this race or go to that race or do something else, or to root for this driver or root for that driver, and that's a great thing to be able to do. I mean, it's a great thing to have that. People's discretionary time and discretionary income are valuable and limited, and so if you're going to use their time and their income to come to a race, and you have some influence over maybe how they experience it, that's a great thing. And now, I never, I think, back, especially, as a newspaper writer, you that you'll potentially have a little bit of notoriety, but no, I couldn't have predicted social media. I couldn't have predicted that I would be on Fox. So
tweet ups.
Yes, tweet ups. All those things contribute to people. It's great to be able to make connections with people, and to feel like people have this connection to you. That's a great thing. That's why I got into journalism. I didn't get into it to go to races or that kind of thing. I did it to connect to readers, and so anytime somebody comes up to me at the racetrack, I've kind of accomplished my goal.
Nice.
It lets me know that I've accomplished my goal.
No, yeah, exactly. And like you said, you've worked with numerous great outlets, ESPN, the Daytona News Beach Journal. Now you're with Fox Sports. You've been with Fox Sports since 2019, if I'm correct. Tell me, how has it been with Fox Sports? It's obviously, there's there's some fans that really love it. There's some fans that don't. But tell me, as what you're doing, as you're in the media center, you tell me what is it like working with Fox Sports? Because you're not just writing articles. You're doing. I've seen you do videos. I've seen you, with the microphone with the Fox Sports logo on it. Tell me what it's like to work with Fox.
Well, I mean, first I would just work with a lot of great people and a lot of talented people, and even bigger, a lot of passionate people. A lot of people who care about what they do and care about the product that we're delivering to people. Now, certainly people can, certainly people gotta have their opinions, and that's good too. You're always going to have that. So, but I enjoy working with the people I work with. I enjoy the variety of things I get to do. As you said, I can write. I get to do interviews for Race Hub. I do sometimes some videos for Race Hub. We do videos for digital. We have our You Kids Don't Know series that we do on our digital platforms. So, Fox certainly has challenged me to do more than what I plan on doing, as a writer. And it's and it's fun. And look, again, as a journalist, you've got to give people and deliver the information to people the way they consume it. And some people still like to read it, but there's certainly a segment of people who would prefer to watch things on video or watch Race Hub. And so the more ways you can contribute, the more people who are going to consume your content, the better.
Yeah. And, there's going to be people that see this and go, man, I wish I could do what Bob's doing right now. What, with all the experience you have, what do you think's the biggest single piece of advice for someone to be in the NASCAR Media Center someday?
Yeah. I mean, my main advice to people is to kind of put yourself in uncomfortable positions, because you're always going to be put in uncomfortable positions. There's a lot of people who if they want to write about NASCAR, think that they have to find a job in NASCAR right after college. And I would say find something that might include some racing, whether it's 10% or 20% or 30% or 50%. But if you're doing things in other sports, or whether it's news, or if you're in the PR or marketing, whether part of it is a NASCAR account, another part is not NASCAR, you should do that, because teams and media outlets like people who have a range of experiences and are open to ideas. And so I think that's important. And then the other advice I always have to people in the media is, don't be afraid to become a viral video, because you do this long enough, either you're going to make a mistake, or somebody's not going to, you're going to have a question that might rub somebody the wrong way. And with all the cameras out there, there's chance it's going to be on video forever. And if you're, as long as you're comfortable with what you're asking and you have a question, it's just there. You can't worry about, or you can't feel like, man, I don't want to do this, because then I'll become I don't want to become a meme, or I don't want to
right
or become part of a viral moment for a little bit. But like I said, it's going to happen if you do this long enough.
Yeah, and you just brought a good point there. For folks that don't know, usually Friday and Saturdays are the days that the drivers will come in. They'll either do the media bullpen, or they'll have some that go up on the stage there and do kind of a traditional press conference there. And they always ask, does anyone have any questions? And usually you're the first one there to get a question. But is there an art to asking questions? Because it always seems like you always ask the right ones, and I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. If you prefer not to ask a yes or no question, leave a question that is going to require an explanation, and and depending on the situation, I mean, I wouldn't beat around the bush too much, right? Like if you want to, just ask it, and maybe think of a way to, if it's something that you feel like is going to make that could be uncomfortable for the driver, think of a way to maybe ask it, and so maybe it's not as uncomfortable. But sometimes you just gotta ask it, and most of the drivers, they know it's coming. They know, and they may not enjoy it, but they know that if they're in the media center, they're going to be asked questions, so that they should be, for the most part, prepared for them. So that's my only, that's my advice. And I think, as I think drivers understand that as long as you're fair, that things, most of the time, that they're understanding, and sometimes they're not, or they're just not in a good mood, and that happens, and that's just, it's not personal, it's business most of the
Right.
for the most part. So, but again, and then, when you talk about asking questions, just want to ask, what I think, what I'm interested in or what I think fans are interested in. Usually that's the same thing.
There you go. I like that, Bob. All right, we just got, a handful of races before the regular season ends and the playoffs begin at Arlington. What's the biggest thing you're going to be looking forward to? Is there any particular track? Is there any particular driver that you're waiting on? What's ahead of us?
Well, I just think the bubble with McDowell and Suarez and Wallace and Allmendinger and Gibbs, is going to be a pretty wild last several weeks going into the end of the regular season. Then you got Bowman and Chase Elliott trying to get in from a little bit further back, and so I think that whole dynamic among all those drivers is going to be pretty incredible to watch. And then if a couple of drivers outside the top 16 win, or a couple of those, 2 or 3 of those drivers win, then you're talking about Keselowski and Buescher potentially being on the bubble or battling each other for a spot. So that's really what I'm looking at. Not looking at a particular race as much as it's very tight there for those final spots to make the playoffs. And a lot of drivers who, look, if Chase Elliott doesn't make the playoffs, he missed 7 races, right? And so I think he'd be like, well, it kind of is what it is, right?
Right.
But, Bubba Wallace has never made the playoffs. Suarez made it last year, but, you look at what his teammates doing, he's got the pressure on him. McDowell, if McDowell were to point his way into the playoffs, that would be, I don't think anybody would ever predicted a front row car could point their way into the playoffs. If RFK gets both their cars into the playoffs, it'll be the first time in several years that organization has 2 cars in the playoffs. Allmendinger trying to get Colleague into the playoffs. So I just think that there's a lot. Ty Gibbs, a rookie, trying to get in the playoffs. There's a lot on the line for a lot of these drivers who are in the mix.
Hey, there you go. That's a lot of storylines there. It's going to keep you busy. But and Bob, cannot thank you enough for being on here, man. I don't think probably my next race will probably be at Kansas, so hopefully we'll see you there. But Bob, thank you again for joining the Show Me NASCAR podcast, and we will see you guys on hopefully here in the next couple weeks. Hopefully Harry will be able to come back, and we'll dive back into this episode, I'm sure, and break it down, and we'll talk about the next race we'll cover. But thank you guys for joining the Show Me NASCAR podcast. We'll catch you later. See you guys.